God. And I have to watch because they're starting to use these Wednesday night classes on Sunday morning for the radio program, and I got to watch that. We got to correct that because you can't let your hair down on Wednesday night because you might say something that
They don't like it.
well, no, they wouldn't like it. Judges. One thing that is unbelievably uncommon about the judges in the period, when did the judges come about? After Joshua. Okay, why were they there? What were they? What did they teach or instruct? Okay, let's do it this way. When God brought the children of Israel out of Egyptian bondage, He took them to the foot of Mount Sinai. What did Moses say when he arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai?
Be right back.
I came right back. Where had he been before he led them to Mount Sinai?
The land of Midian.
Where was the land of Midian?
Right there on
Mount
Mount Sinai.
Sinai. What did Moses learn in Mount Sinai? Well, nothing else. He learned the name of God. What else did he learn? Well, he got the 10 words, what are called by most people the 10 Commandments. When the 10 Commandments were given, what was the person who gave them called? When the 10 Commandments were given, the administrator, or the means through which, or the vehicle that was used of God, what were those people called?
Levites.
No.
They were descendants of Aaron.
Well, they were, no, not, no. Oh, no.
Well, the 10 Commandments came out of burning bush that was God.
No, the 10 Commandments did not come out of the burning bush.
That's what the movie showed.
Sir?
That's what the movie showed.
Well, you better not watch movies. Movies.
Rewind.
The finger of God.
I thought Christ and Moses were like on a one-on-one or whatever they gave.
Well, who was this Moses and what was he called? He was called a mediator.
Oh.
What is a mediator?
One that acts in the interest of
One in between. All right, so turn quickly. Let's turn to the book of Galatians. It's a thing that I have wanted to talk about a lot of times, but haven't, as to why the judges were. You know, the one thing that irritates me about translations a lot of times is that they change words in translating, that if they would use a common word, we wouldn't have problems understanding. What is it that irritates me about Moses and the children of Israel in bondage is what they call the plagues. Why do they call them plagues? Well, you say they were a plague, but really what were they? Miracles. Moses was a miracle worker. Now, if the miracles are not recognized as such and are...
Side with the Pharaoh, that's why they're called.
Yeah, but what's the purpose of miracles?
Power of God.
Okay, but what was their purpose? Every time that God would bring in a new covenant, what always accompanied that coming in of a new covenant?
Signs and wonders.
Miracles. But if you take the word miracle out of that, what happens when you get to the New Testament and we find that miracles accompanied the coming in of the new covenant? You lose the power, the reason for existence, and you give the Pentecostals something to talk about they ain't never been able to get over since the days of Charles Wesley. What was the purpose of miracles? To prove that it was God's man with God's message. So you want to turn to Hebrews 2, but where I am now is Galatians 3. Let's go first to Galatians 3, and then we'll go to Hebrews 2.
Well, being that the miracle was put in place whenever the new covenant came about.
Always was.
And that way man wasn't able to go in and put his 2 cents in there and say, this is how we're going to do this.
No.
But now what he's saying is that the miracles that Moses performed, of the what they call the plagues, were actually miracles, which was showing that what Moses was doing and saying was from God.
Yeah, so when Moses would go in before Pharaoh and he'd say, let my people go, Pharaoh would say, catch a boat. He said, okay, but I'm going to catch a boat, but the first thing going to happen to you is you're going to have a miracle called lice. You're going to have a miracle called darkness. You're going to have a miracle called the water turning into blood. You're going to have a miracle that will, and what and who and where were these miracles? Now listen to this. Never performed. No, in Israel. I mean in Egypt. Where were they never performed? In amongst the children of God. Well, what do you mean, oh sure? Where is it that these people are misunderstanding then that miracles were never for the people of God?
Weren't they able to just roam around? They were unaffected by the miracles?
Why? Why? That's true. Well, they did need them, in fact, but they'd have been a whole lot better off if they'd got one or two. If they'd got a kind of slap on the wrist every once in a while. But in Goshen, and what was Goshen? That was the segment of land that was given Jacob and the 75 souls that came into Egypt, in which these miracles never came. Okay, I'm going to ask you another question. Was the miracle of the death of the firstborn son then worked in Goshen? Yes, but it was a thing of testing and proving of the children of Israel in Goshen. What was it for the children of Egypt? That's the let my people go string. After that, it was over. The Pharaoh and his people and all the Egyptians gathered and put the pressure and the power on the Pharaoh and said, get them out of here. And let them take anything they want. Pay them with gold and silver. Do anything you can. Get them out of here. Okay, so what was Moses? A mediator. You in Galatians 3? Galatians 3 about verse, let's start verse 19.
For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise, but God gave it to Abraham by promise. Wherefore then serve the law. It was added because of transgressions, so the seed should come to whom the promise was made. And it was ordained by angels in the hand of the mediator.
Now, what does that verse mean? I used to read this as a young preacher, and I used to wonder and think, I never heard of any angels out preaching. You know what I thought all angels were? Winged spiritual beings. You know what I found out when I began to study? That wasn't so. What were angels? Messengers. That's what the word means. And how would it and could it not be that these were winged spiritual beings?
Because it had to be able to speak to the people and link with spiritual beings in existence.
First of all, they didn't have wings if they were spirit beings called angels. Sir?
They didn't have flying creatures.
Flying No, why? Let me ask you, what language do angels speak?
Which angel?
I've never heard of
Angels.
English here. Yeah. Okay.
You know, we never ask the question. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13:1, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. Who were these angels?
Preachers.
Exactly. But what does the religious world think these angels are?
Spirit beings. They think they're
Spirit beings. That's the reason they want the angels to come along to help the angels, to come along to help the angels, to come along to help the angels. They don't understand who these angels were. They don't believe in Hebrews 1 that these angels were servants of God who were preachers of the gospel, which were in all the covenant. Who's the first angel amongst men?
First preacher
Yeah,
had to be Adam.
Adam. Sure. Then when the covenant changed, who did the next angel of fame and prominence that came about? Who was he? Moses. See, the covenant didn't change with Noah. God just changed his mind and decided to destroy this thing, take all over, start again. But a covenant changed with Moses. This is what we're reading about. What does it mean that it was ordained by angels? It was validated. How did these angels, that's the reason I'm asking the question, how did these angels validate this covenant? Exactly.
What'd you say about it?
Are working miracles?
Well, yeah, sure.
What did Moses do when he went in before our boy Pharaoh? Had Aaron come along with a staff in his hand, and if Adam had known that snake was in that staff, he probably would have run away from him. But anyway, he came in there with it, and he threw his snake down, his staff down, and it turned into a snake. What did Pharaoh's wise men do in response?
Same thing.
Yeah, and what happened then?
The one ate the two. The one ate the bad one.
The one from Aaron had dinner. So what was that proving? There were false teachers. They were teaching a false doctrine. But God had come to set the record straight. And so the messenger, or angels, was Moses, and then it went to the Levites, and the Levites with the priesthood. Ordained, established. Now, if you look at Hebrews 2 and verse 1, can anybody quote that? Therefore, sir? No, chapter 2. Therefore.
Therefore, we ought to give the more earnest heed to the things which we have heard, lest at any time we should let them slip.
Now I want you to listen to this, because you're thinking this is talking about the New Testament, right? Keep going.
For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward.
When did that take place?
In the Old Testament.
Sure, keep going.
How shall we escape if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken by the Lord?
Okay, when did the angelic representatives change?
When Christ died on the cross.
The
No.
message never changed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, say it again.
When did the angelic message change?
On the day of Pentecost.
The covenant changed, but not the angelic message.
When
Baptism for the remission of sins.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, no, what did John and Jesus preach?
repentance.
For the remission of sins. And baptism for the remission of sins. Look at Mark 1 and 4.
Baptism of repentance, it wasn't for the remission.
Read Mark 1 and 4 for me.
It hadn't been shed yet.
Wait a minute. There's a preparatory message and an actual occurrence.
John did baptize in the wilderness and preach the baptism of repentance for the remission of sins.
Yeah. They baptized in the baptism for the remission of sins. Why was that there? It was an explanatory thing that would occur. So when the actual covenant changed, there would be no, what is that about? We don't understand that. Never saw that in this world. It was something that had already taken place. Now, so when was it, when in context, when in time did the angels of the Old Testament preach the message of God? How did they confirm it? Tell me of a messenger or a prophet or a teacher who either didn't teach from the confirmed message or when they taught, they confirmed it with miracles in the Old Testament.
He taught, and then
Yahweh was not the messenger of the Old Testament.
Noah was.
Noah was not the, no.
But he was a preacher. He had testified miracles because he had preached that the flood was coming. No one listened, and a miracle did happen, and the flood occurred.
You didn't listen to the question. When did the beginning of miracles occur? Because the covenant was going to change, and who were those who worked those miracles?
You had to start with Moses. Didn't it?
Yeah, in the what they called the plagues. What about Aaron and all? What miracles did they perform? Oh yeah, they did. What was the Urim and the Thummim?
We don't normally consider that a miracle.
What did the high priest wear all through the Old Testament covenant? The Urim and the Thummim. Why did they have the Urim and the Thummim? You know what the Urim and the Thummim were? That's just not strange words. Those were things that the high priest of God wore on his vestment. Why did he wear them on his vestment?
To signify he was a high priest.
Huh?
To signify that he was the high priest. Right, because he was commanded to.
Okay, well, anybody else could have grabbed his jacket. So, but what was the purpose of the Urim and the Thummim?
The authority and power of God.
Work miracles.
Oh,
See into the future. Why is it that every king of Israel would want to call in the high priest or a prophet or somebody who was a spokesman for God when they wanted to ask directions of God? They were the men who would confirm, teach, establish the law of God. Maybe we're going too long around the curve, but here's what I'm after. Moses was a miracle worker. He's never given that credit. Aaron was a miracle worker. The next high priest of Israel was Aaron's son. He was a miracle worker. The miracle workers were those who could foretell the future. They could speak things. They could teach the law. They were the law of God and the covenant. If you had questions, to whom did you go? To the high priest or the Levitical priesthood. You didn't go to the tribe of Judah. You didn't go to Benjamin. You went to the Levites. These were the angels.
oh, I got your point.
After the angel came and mediated the law, what came next?
The apostles.
Not in the Old Testament, but you're not wrong. But the apostles did and were the angels. the teachers, the preachers.
So, to answer your question, is it judges?
Correct.
After the leader,
And what is another name for the idea or the word judge?
Mediator,
No, no,
mediator.
no. That's awful close. What else?
Lawgiver. Well, that's what a judge does.
No.
Interpreter, decision maker.
Okay, but what were they also called? Lawyers? Well, lawyers got a bad name today.
I think bad taste in your mouth. Go between.
Elders.
That's what we're going to be learning about.
We'll teach on that sometime. You've been doing it for 2 weeks.
It's a different appellation. Huh?
Are the deacons the assistants?
There were and never has been deacons. That's in the Roman Catholic Church.
So, the judges were the elders that knew the law.
It's another terminology.
Well, yeah, they're the same, one and the same thing, or they knew how to determine and, I guess, judge on.
It kind of throws it in your teeth, don't it? You know what is interesting though about the judges? There was a woman judge.
Oh, yeah.
You say, "Oh yeah," that you act as though that's just no biggie.
She said Judge Judy. I said,
No, it wasn't Judge Judy. What was her name? No. She's also called the church mother. Oh yeah, in the Old Testament.
Her name is Mary.
Mary, no. Go back to the book of Jude. You won't be guessing.
She said Mary.
No. Her name was Debbie.
Deborah.
Yeah. And where was Deborah's throne of judgment established?
She in heaven.
No. Now, where did people come to have their questions answered and know how to live and what to do? And who was the instigator, propagator of the children of Israel in the days of Deborah? She. Where did they come to visit her? Not in the temple, not in the tabernacle. Where did they come? To the grove where she sat. She sat, I think, if I'm not mistaken, under a tree. Look about, chapter 4. Yeah. She sat under a tree. The wife of Lapidoth.
Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lepithoth.
Yeah, Lapidoth.
Israel at that time.
Yeah.
She dwelt under the palm tree.
Ah, so where was it that Debbie judged? In Florida. No, I'm kidding about Florida. But she judged under a palm tree. And when the people wanted to come for judgment, where did they go?
Towards the palm trees.
That's where Debbie was. Debbie was the one that sparked wars and everything else. And she was the wife of Lapidoth. And she judged Israel. How long? 40 years. Now, if you've never, I've studied, and you can, with me, you studied the judges. Who was another judge of great fame? That's exactly right. What was it that God used these judges to do? work miracles. Did Debbie work a miracle? Yes, she prophesied of the things that were going to come to pass and put the faith in the heart of one, Barak. You ever heard of Barak? You ever heard of Othniel? Well, boy, we're going to have a lot to learn then. Othniel. Othniel. You've never met a man by the name of Othniel. Well, you're going to meet him. Turn to the 3rd chapter and look at verse 7. Judges.
For the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and forgat the Lord their God, and served Baal and the groves. Therefore the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel. He sold them into the hand of
Cushan Ruthathaim. You know what the Cushan and Ruthathaim means? That's one more evil than Cushan the first. Go ahead.
the king of Mesopotamia, and the children of Israel served Cushan Rishathaim 8 years.
And that's Mesopotamia. All right, and verse 9.
And when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, and the son of Kenaz, and Caleb's younger brother.
Do you know who Othniel was? Okay, I do, you say. He would be the son of Kenaz. Do you know who Kenaz was?
The brother of Caleb,
And who was Caleb?
somebody's son.
Joshua's right hand.
No, well, of course he was somebody's son, but who was Caleb?
Right hand man.
Who?
Joshua.
And being Joshua's right-hand man, what did Caleb do with Joshua? Yeah. No, he didn't.
I got a question, just to, not trying to get off subject, but
Well, we're trying to find a subject, so that's all right. You don't have to worry about it. We're trying to get started on Judges. Go ahead.
Samson was a judge.
Every time.
He was young when he was, I guess when he fell in love with Jezebel or whatever her name was.
Delilah.
Delilah, yeah. I couldn't remember her name.
He never did marry her, but go ahead.
Well, you know what I mean.
He shacked up.
Yeah. So was there no age requirement to be a judge?
Yeah.
Well, then how was he a judge?
The age requirement was the time after the mediators.
That makes no sense.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. That doesn't tell me a thing. It just tells me that it's like, it's a time.
There was no chronological age requirement. That's what you're asking. And there was none. No, it was who God called. It was who God called. How old did you have to be a prophet?
Yes, after that answer, you didn't have to be any certain age.
Exactly. You know when Jeremiah became a prophet? To a hot old age of 9.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Imagine at 9 years of age being a prophet of God. I think that's right. It's Jeremiah. Turn to Jeremiah.
But Samson was also judge, jury, and executed, right?
So were any other judges.
That's why people don't understand, these people want to follow the law, they don't understand the law, statutes, and judgments, they don't understand the whole scenario of what that law was and meant, and the people that passed judgment were called judges.
I believe you got it pretty good there. And what were these people who were called judges also called? I'll be dog.
Hey, somebody wrote it on gold.
Yeah. Let's see, go back to Jeremiah 1 and talk to me about verse 5, Bobby.
Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee.
Knew thee to be what?
It says knew him. And before thou camest forth out of the womb, I sanctified thee.
Oh, for what?
Thee a prophet unto the nation.
I'll be.
So he was an elder.
No.
None.
No. He was a prophet. We're on ages there. He was a prophet. And but verse 7, go ahead, Bobby.
But
Whatsoever.
Oh, I'm sorry, whatsoever I command thee, thou shalt speak.
That's right. So what is it when you tell a kid to do something usually? Except maybe in our day and time.
I can't.
They do it. No, you say, you go tell your daddy this, or you go tell your mama that. What do they usually do? They carry the message just as plain as they can that they heard. So that's kind of the idea. Now let's go back to Judges. The Judges came in as an example, as a pattern that we have never maybe looked at. I'm just wanting to bring it to your attention because I think it's something you need to understand. So who was, by Austin, who was our boy Ehud?
That's a name?
Yeah, like Austin's a name.
Austin's a good name.
Well, Ehud, he kind of thought he was kind of cool too.
He was a judge.
There you go. Or was he? Or was he appointed by a judge? Now let's go to Judges 3 and verse 12. You know, I kept reading when I was a young preacher. And I got kind of discouraged because we'd have these cats go astray and they'd be worshiping Baal and they'd be doing this, doing that, and God would send somebody to stomp them. And then all of a sudden they'd cry to God, they'd ask for forgiveness and repent and all that stuff. And what would God do? Let them off the hook. And he'd send somebody to bring them a miracle. Miraculously deliver them. Yeah, and when he miraculously delivered them, they would know it was from God and not the individual. So who got the glory? God. And not the individual. This is a little different than the eldership, isn't it? All right, well, let's find out about Ehud.
Judges 3 and 5.
Yeah, let's just start with verse 12.
Of Judges 3.
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Verse 12. And it says, and the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord. The Lord strengthened Eglon, king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord.
And who strengthened old Eglon?
God of the Israelites.
God did. Why did God strengthen Eglon?
He had a job for him.
He was going to send him to give his kids a spanking. All right, keep going.
He gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek.
Of who?
Of Ammon.
Ammon. You got two M's. Ammon.
Ammon.
Yeah.
And Amalek.
There you go.
And went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees.
Who had lived and worked and judged under a palm tree?
Deborah.
Yeah, Debbie was gone though. Keep going.
So the children of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years.
No, this was before she got there, to be honest with
The
you.
children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera.
Make fun of that boy's name. If you meet him on the other side of Jordan in a palace of God, you ain't gonna make a oh, you got a weird name, son. Huh? Why are you going to meet him?
No, I'm asking why they named him that.
Maybe you better ask his mom and daddy. I don't think he had much to do with it.
Look at the New Testament. They had Peter, James, John. Old Testament was Ehud. No,
It's different language, man.
it was evolution is what it was. No, it was a different language.
Most of those names mean something.
Sure. And I'll get, he's trying to make fun of the guy's name. I don't want to be that.
So Ehud, the son of Gera, Benjamite, and left hand, a man left-handed.
Yeah, that's important. The left-handed cats, they had a problem. What was the problem with the left-handed cat? He was considered very inferior. Because it's always the right hand that was the hand of power. So Ehud. And what did Ehud do? He was a Benjamite. Keep going. Verse 15.
And by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab.
Now what present? They sent Ehud. And when Ehud, if you've never read this, you won't know. What did Ehud bring the king of Moab? You doggone right. How long was it? A cubit. How long is a cubit?
18
About 18 inches. He brought him in, and where did he carry it?
And it was a 2-edged.
Huh? No, on the right side of his body, down by his. Yeah. And what was he going to do with that sword? And not no going to. He did it. Yeah, and so when he walked in to meet the boy, and he said, "I brought you a gift," and the king said, "Everybody else leave. This guy's got a gift for him." And what did he do?
Stabbed him in the gut.
Yeah, in the intestines. You know how I know it was the intestines?
Plus dirt came out. Because dirt came out.
The drug.
No, because he says he had a fat belly and the fat closed up around it, and then when he pulled the dagger out, dirt came out.
And what was dirt? Yeah. Yeah, his body waste. Manure. Sir?
Dirt came out of his buttocks, is what it says. It says buttocks.
In the Old Testament, it says.
You know, is there a significance that?
I think we're talking to Google here. I think that's the problem.
And the haft also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade so that he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt came out. The dirt being out of the buttocks. That's what it says.
So,
What's that telling?
well, what's wrong with that?
Is there a purpose that it was a 2-edged sword, dagger?
Yeah, the purpose was to kill him.
But is there,
No, do you mean was there a purpose he had the two-edged sword? No, he made it. Why he decided to make it a two-edged sword, it might have been one of the first times that a two-edged sword was made. I don't really. That may be true. I don't know.
So it cuts going in, cuts around.
Sir?
It cuts him.
Cuts a gwine as they say, the black brethren used to say, a gwining, coming and a gwining. Coming and going. All right, so now you know who Ehud was. Have you ever met Ehud? Bob Austin doesn't. He made fun of his name. Man, I tell you, that's insulting to make fun of a guy's name.
Remember that too, I'll say, go get you.
And Ehud escaped.
through the quarries, through everything, he escaped out.
He went out the screen porch and summer porch. And Ehud, it came to pass, verse 27, read it right quick.
Ehud escaped while they tarried.
How about verse 27?
Sorry. And it came to pass, when he was come, he blew a trumpet in the mountain of Ephraim, and the children.
Ephraim.
I said Ephraim.
It's Ephraim.
Ephraim?
Ephraim.
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 And the children of Israel went down with him from the mount, and he before them. And he said unto them, Follow after me, for the Lord hath delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan toward Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over.
And when they tried to pass over it, what did they do? Verse 29.
And they slew of Moab at the time about 10,000 men, all lusty and all men of valor.
What do you mean lusty?
They were looking for glory.
These big, strong dudes.
Lusty means fat.
Not necessarily.
Lusty, it's a Hebrew, it says fat.
Okay, go for that. Who said that?
The Hebrew
They were muscular.
translation says
They were strong and muscular. Go ahead. And what were the Jews? Small, yeah. Go ahead.
So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years.
Yeah, it's always they got 40 years off. Or what's 80? That's 80. So if they'd have a good judge for 40 years, they'd have 80 years apiece. Now, who would be the next judge? And by the way, David, you missed the introduction. What is another name for judge? And why did they occur? Why did they come into play after the mediator? And the mediator always came working miracles. So these judges were those who worked miracles by the power of God. And what was their purpose? To judge Israel. And why were they judging Israel? They'd gone astray. Why had they gone astray? They weren't following the book. And they'd tacked up with that Balaam. They'd gone over with all these people. All right, let's go now to Deborah. This be Debbie. Well, we'll start with chapter 5.
Okay, verse 1.
Yeah.
Then sang Debbie and Barak, the son of Abinoam.
You said that one right, Abinoam. I'm proud of you.
On that day sang.
Now, what is it that Debbie had started doing? Judging. No, she wasn't preaching. She was judging Israel. As a judge of Israel, she was being an elder of the people. And as she was doing that, she couldn't take the position of leader, so what would she do? God had told her who she could use. Was he a deacon? Absolutely not. These are not correspondingly equal to what we see in the New Testament, but the concept is following in the line of thought. All right, so she couldn't get Barak to do anything, right? And so she had to get him geared up. And so if you'll go back to, has anybody ever heard? Yes, ma'am.
So can women be elders?
No.
But Debbie was an elder.
Well, she served in that capacity and function in the Old Testament law.
So in the Old Testament, women could be elders?
This one was.
Well,
So I guess she could.
That's why the law.
write that down, Sandy. Write that down.
That's why the law.
Well, yeah, Sandy, you're way too young for that to affect you, but that's all right. I don't care. It was just a fact. And when Debbie was out there being an elder, what was her position? To judge Israel. But who was the lawgiver? God. And the lawgiver of Israel was Moses. And when Moses came in, what did he come in doing? Working miracles. Only they change it and say that Moses did these plagues, because that gets them all messed up and they forget Moses was a miracle worker. But when we read in Hebrews 2 again, we ought to give the murderers heed the things which we've heard, lest any time we should let them slip. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression received a just recompense or reward. Since that was true then, how do we escape now if we neglect so great salvation, which at the first began to be spoken to the Lord? What did the Lord come speaking? A new covenant was coming. How did he convince people that this New Testament covenant was coming? Exactly. See, he was following the pattern that was established. All right, so Barak was the old boy that went down and was supposed to take 10,000 people to go up and whip the Assyrians, wasn't it? Look at verse 7. The inhabitants of the village ceased. They ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose. That I arose a mother of Israel. You hear the black people talk about the church mother. Here's where they get the concept. Is there a church mother today? No. These were women, this was a woman of wisdom, and she knew how to decipher. And these people had chosen gods. And so she pulls up our boy Barak, and she says, you got to go down there. Verse 12. Awake, awake, Deborah, awake, awake. Utter a song, arise, Barak, and lead thy captivity captive. What is captivity led captive? You know, we read this in Ephesians, the 4th chapter, and most people don't understand where he led captivity captive and gave gifts to men. What is it, those who are captivity captive? In the New Testament, it's a spiritual concept. What is the physical example that would help us understand it? The Jews who were under the bondage of a people who was trying to destroy their faith in God. And they didn't have freedom. And they couldn't worship freely. And they couldn't be their own people. So it's the concept that I wanted you to see, led captivity captive. And of course, when Jesus led captivity captive, he gave gifts to men. What was the gifts that he gave to men? The baptism of the Spirit, where they could work miracles and speak by the message of the Holy Spirit. All right, verse 12. Then he made him that remaineth have dominion over the nobles amongst the people. I'm in the 13th verse of Judges 5. We skipped over because I got to go. I'm in a hurry. And the princes, verse 15, and the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar and also Barak. And he was sent on foot into the valley. For the divisions of Reuben there were great thoughts of heart. Why abodest thou? So she gets Barak to lead the fight. And so Barak says, hey, I can't go do this. So what is it that God does? He takes Barak and his 10,000 and he says, you go down to the river. I'm going to choose an army for you. So he takes his thousands down to the river and he says, now watch the way they drink. What do you mean, watch the way they drink? Well, he said, if they drink lapping like a dog, them the boys you want. If they drink and have a silver spoon in their mouth, send them home. They ain't doing you no good. Let's read that. Have you read that? Sir? We were talking about this way that God chose. Well, what I wanted to do was introduce this concept of the judges. And if you've never studied the judges, if you'll come on Wednesday night, we'll be able. Because we got Gideon. And Gideon was the guy with the fleece. And when Gideon prepared for battle, I had Gideon and Barak messed up. Gideon was the guy that went down, and the Lord they had tens of thousands, and he sent him away and sent him out with 300. Gideon said, no, you can't be kidding. So you know what Gideon did? He started his own rock and roll band. You know how Gideon started his rock and roll band? He placed his 300 soldiers around the Syrian army, was numberless, and he gave them a metal rod to beat a silver pan, and he said, at my signal, you start beating that rod you start beating that on that pan. And the noise was so great, it freaked out that army that they were surrounded, and they thought there was 300,000 Jews around them. That's heavy metal group. That's what I said. I said this. And when they got that heavy metal, look, verse 9 of chapter 7. It came to pass the same night, the Lord said unto him, arise, get thee down unto the host, for I have delivered it into thine hand. You see, the point is, if they'll do the will of God, he'll take care of them. But if thou fear to go down, go thou with Phurah, thy servant, down to the host, and thou shalt hear what they say, and afterward thy hands shall be strengthened. And so when he got down there, the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along in the valley like grasshoppers for multitude. And their camels were without number, as the sand of the sea for multitude. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man that told a dream unto his fellow, and said, behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came into the tent, and smote it that it fell, and overturned it, that the tent lay along. In other words, it fell over, couldn't stay in it. And his fellow answered and said, this is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. For into his hand hath God delivered Midian and all the host. So old Gideon comes back and he says, I got it. I'm reading it clear. Verse 17, he said unto them, look on me and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outside of the camp, it shall be as I do, so shall ye do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all that are with me. Then blow ye the trumpets also on every side of the camp, and say, The sword of the Lord and of Gideon. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came into the outside of the camp in the beginning of the middle watch, and they had put newly set the watch, and they blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and brake the pitchers, and held the lamps in their left hands, and the trumpets in their right hands to blow withal. And they cried, The sword of the Lord and Benjamin. And they stood every man in his place round about the camp, and all the host ran and cried and fled. And the 300 blew the trumpets, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. And the host fled to Bethsheba, into Zerath, and to the borders of Abel-Meholah, unto Tabbath. And the men of Israel gathered themselves together out of Naphtali, and out of Asher, and out of Manasseh, and pursued the Midianites. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all of Mount Ephraim, saying, Come down against the Midianites, and take before them the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. Then all the men of Ephraim gathered themselves together, and took the waters unto Bethbara and Jordan. And Gideon conquered an innumerable host with 300 men. What is that principle teaching us?
And anything is possible with the Lord.
Exactly. It doesn't matter about numbers. That's insignificant. If God says, I'll get it done, get in line. What were these judges doing? Judging, being elders, being those who would teach men how to live in faith to God. That was their purpose. And that's what's been lost a lot of time in the study of the Judges, and people think it's a sham, and they don't even understand what the purpose of these men were, or purpose is. So it's kind of an interesting thing if you'll read. We'll get back into this because we'll probably start, it's easier to start in chapter 1. But we'll start, and if you can, and you can take the chance to read the first 4 or 5 chapters of Judges. You're going to learn some stuff that's some good stuff, and then we'll give the application that these judges, whether you realize it or not. I know this is one thing about God that's always interesting. He can teach you without you even knowing you're being taught. And that's what he was doing. And you talking about our boy Samson? He was an unmarried judge. Well, let's put it this way. He was married and divorced and never got married again. And what'd they do to his wife? They killed her. Her people did. So you can see, I hope, what we're talking about.